And I'm back. All right. Starting this 21st stream. And you can see I'm back to nowhere. Not really. I've gotten, I think, in a better place overall in terms of program structure. Everything now comes through a instruction queue and then gets processed during the loop in the main thread. Certain things get pushed on and started in separate threads. Programs do, but they all kind of shoot back to this original thread to do any of these major instructions or whatnot. So I've got some programs that I need to write. I've kind of broken it up again the way that I did FC 360 or whatever it is, but starting with the menu though would be the one that I need to get back in and work through. Now the menu was part of the home screen, which has now been just reduced back to a buffer, I believe. Yeah, so all of this here was done to deal with the menu screen. So I'm going to attempt to replicate some of that, but I want to extend it and make it better. So I'm going to copy that into here. So we'd clear home. We had a selected index and a selected option index. We cleared out the tabs. I might copy a lot of this. Just to give me a base point. And then, so here's what we had been doing is we've been going to this key up buffer. Now, one thing I could do, or should do here, is simply use the get key for menus to actually adjust the position. So now get key isn't blocking, which is kind of unique about it. So I might have to think through that a little bit. I really like this while it's -1,1. Then do this stuff, otherwise return. Or, well, do it until a selection is made. So one of the things I want to do is make it so that there's not that flash. And I think that the fact that all of this stuff will go back to the main thread to be processed will probably prevent most of that from happening, I believe, because what should happen is that this was running a clear home, where here, clear right here, to clear out the home buffer. That should happen only once per loop if I do this correctly. If I have a blocking command in here somewheres. Now get key isn't a blocking command, which is part of my problem. Although it could be. I could make it blocking essentially by just doing a loop and waiting. And I think that's probably what I was doing right here. And then the other thing here is I've got the foreground and... Okay, so this was a clear home, effectively. And I don't have some of this stuff even implemented. But then set the selected tab. Well, let's just copy all of this for now. So the selected tab is the tab at the selected tab index. Okay, so this is what we were using. That I'm going to have to rethink is the actual drawing in the tabs. So this draws the tabs across the top. And this was our row. So everything with the cursor. Technically, I believe I can deal with that by just using the output command. What I won't know is the dimensions of the actual screen to know whether, you know, how many columns I have to work with or whatnot. So this could be while get key is less than 0. And I think I've decided 17 is the magic number. And now I was going through keys as they were entered, but really this would be just... So I get rid of this buffer and I just rely on a single key at a time. And I know that these keys are actually that. The key codes from the X and A keys, I believe. This was breaking out of the while loop too. And I don't think I need that because there's no outer while loop anymore. So I should be able to draw this using the output feature without using this concept of a cursor. And thinking about where the cursor is. The cursor is really where like my draw position is. but I can track it. So we think about this being like let's do this row equals 0, all equals 0. What we would say here is not cursor.right, we would say output and we would do the entirety of what I'm going to type out, which is the tab's name. Then I pop the column by the tab name length. And then I would write. Oh, can you not modify that? I thought that would be a. Oh. How about this? I'll make it a tuple. That's better. So we include, no, we do with that, then we're going to increase it again because we're adding a space here. So single space. Then we have to increase this by 1. That should put our column tabs across the top, except for I need to augment the foreground background or invert them in for the selected version. Now, I haven't actually implemented this stuff in the input buffer yet. Hey, buddy. Why don't you, Oh, why don't you give it back to Anna? So the home buffer, or this could be thought of as, figured I'd do that while my kids are getting told what to do here. Okay, so I've got the cursor here. I don't think I will use this actually. I think the cursor is more of a function of other things. Sort of. It's really hard to say at this point. I might come back to it again here. I was using the cursor for the idea of whether I wrap or not. But I'm starting to wonder about the idea of like an infinitely sized scrolling buffer, and having an active row or something like that. So clear would just clear all of those particular rows from it. So if we had like a, well, let's just think about this for a second. Kind of in the same way that I was doing the editor, we'd have a list of thing is those positions have to exist whether or not and there is very specific behavior with scrolling through them. So no, I think the buffer should be fixed size. And I think that's what I had here. And they kept track of the foreground and background in each cell. So that was rendered. It would render from this based on these flags or whatnot. Oh, I gotta recreate this stuff. Sorry, I know I've been through this already, but I want to rethink a little bit of it here. So minimally, this will have a struct of a cell, which will have a char, a value, and you know what, we don't even need to make it like that. We can use an int for, and really we only need a byte to store it, but the foreground color and background color that we're going to draw it with. And the home really exists of a buffer of this, or the home buffer is really a function of hold on a second. All right, sorry about that. All right, so this is an array and of cells, and this will be based off of the maximum that it can hold, probably based on the max resolution like I've done in other ones. So, and we go based on rows and columns. So this would be our height divided by the sysfont dot char height. So we do that to make our rows and columns count total. So those are actually how much space we'll allocate, but there will be like a logical size to it too, that we'll have to deal with. So clear should be fairly similar to what it was. It's just to set it through and wipe out all of the characters to be 0. Now, one of the things we don't have here that we'll have to do like we did on the other one is to send in the foreground and background colors. And in fact, we only need to know the background color, I suppose, because we could just set them both. Oh, are we doing it as a... Oh. Okay. That would be just a straight up walk of the data and doing it like that. And our rows are our buffer dot get length for our 0th. And we just say the colors are the same because we only really need to know the one. And we'll provide a constructor here. Background equals background. And this will just set it to the displays background, which again, I don't like how this is stored here. I kind of think I might refactor it so that both the might change it so that both the display buffer or the home buffer and the graphics buffer both keep their colors with them. So that you could toggle them independent of each other instead of setting it globally. But we'll see. Okay. So these will all have to have with them. Said I don't like this, but then it's like the menu. I don't know. No, this should be okay. Like I said, I'll rethink this if this works or not. It shouldn't be too much work to move it over if it sucks. So. So the idea with output is that it would start at a line and it would wrap, but it wouldn't. But when it reaches the bottom, it would truncate. I believe was the behavior that you would have here. So what we did was we called that wrap and truncate versus wrap and scroll. So wrap is the X value. Scroll is considerably like, pushing the buffer up a row. So what we did here is we said So I'm wondering if it actually doesn't make, I mean, if it makes sense to, again, hold these as like variable lists or whatever, rows. Um, and then adjust their behavior based on like how you display it. Because, you know, if you think about it, if you say that this is a buffer like this, it goes out to here, you know, out to the edge or whatever, and then you and then you wrap around. When you, if you were to change the display in the middle of something like that, now your buffer is like the size is different, so you might have to have a different, like it might need to be drawn differently. So for instance, if I had like 5 menu options and then I went and adjusted them. Oof, how to do this? You know what? I'll just keep going the way that I'm doing it here. So, again, there's actually a logical size to this buffer, 2, which is different from the actual physical size of it, or the. So I'm gonna allocate enough space for you to use the max resolution, but depending on the size, it will be constrained within those resolutions, which is going to make for some odd play if you switch the resolutions up. But I suppose you could just clear all buffers if you did a resolution change, and then it wouldn't be a problem. Anyways, so this was wrap and truncate, which was the idea was, I do need to know here though what the actual resolution we're targeting is to know how many cells I can actually afford. And I could technically do that by No, you know what? I think that the buffer should be resized dynamically based on how much. So it's not fixed like this. So when the display resolution changes, this will get a resize. So if I just pass in rows here and just go like that, I could have something to and just say that resize is a clear, right? Yeah, that makes sense. So in our output, we started our row. And our column. And then we iterate through the string. is C a bad? Oh, sorry. For each character in text. First, we have to see if the row has been exhausted, right? Or sorry, if our column. So if our C is greater than the number of columns, which is, I suppose we could just store that here instead of recomputing it every time off the dim. Although it's really not that complicated to do this. It's just, yeah, that's probably why I did this. So we say if the C is greater than the or equal to the number of calls, then we need to wrap. So we do R plus plus C equals 0. Now we get to here if R is greater than or equal to the number of rows. So this is where the truncate comes into effect. So it actually just doesn't do anything. It just breaks out of this. It's not going to actually print anymore. So if you started outside the realm of it. Now if your R started at 0, well, I don't know what I would do there if your columns were negative. I suppose you could say if column is less than or no. Yeah, what happens if you do pass a negative here? What should happen? Should it just blow up? That would be kind of what I would expect. So maybe I should have some guards here, like if row is less than 0 or call is less than 0. Just call it like is there an argument out of range? Index out of range. Yeah. Whatever. People aren't gonna do that. And it's not my responsibility. Well, yeah, it is my responsibility to make sure they know what they're doing wrong, but I'll come back to that. See, the interesting thing, or why I had a cursor now, is what I'm realizing is that both your display, your output, and your display functions, they have a statefulness to them. So wherever you left off in terms of where you're outputting your row, if you then display, it should display after that. Much like in the same way when you do a console and you output something, or you set the console position, then you do a write. Isn't like, yeah, anyways, I have to think about this. The other thing I want to get working too is the fact that the console actually is visible. which I think will be easier now that I'm putting this stuff in a in this. But so maybe I do need to keep track of the cursor. I'm going to just do it in a very naive way, maybe. Or simple way, like this. Okay. So we've got our cursor again. We've got our buffer. Cursor keeps track of where we are in the buffer. I think I'm just going to make this a I'm probably just recreating everything that I had before. But there was a lot in here that actually should have just been kind of localized to this thing. So we'll see. So in this case, we set our cursor position to row and call. Then we get rid of this. Then our column is greater than, or row is greater than our number of rows. We just break. So we reach the outside of our thing, it truncates again. Otherwise, we set at the buffer at row equal to a cell of which it's the character, our foreground, and our background colors. That was pretty much all there was to that. Now display was a little different. Display just assumes you start wherever your cursor is. And you do a similar procedure where you go through text. But if you reach the end of the columns, you do rows. If you equal the end of the rows, then what you do is you scroll up the rows. And to scroll up the rows, what you do is you, it was a really awkward procedure. I think I actually had a called it scroll, maybe. Wrap and I like that. Yeah, wrap and scroll. So the wrap, this was the scroll procedure. Would only really happen here. In which you start at the last of the rows, or you start at the 0th row, and you go through to the end of the rows. And then you go through each column, and you basically set it to what's in the next row. Except for when you get to the last row. You do that. Then you set the cursor equal to the start of the last row. But you don't just do that, I think. Because you could be... Okay, so this is literally printing one character through here, so if you're going to scroll, you would be wanting to go back to the last position here. It would have already happened, unless you start beyond it. Which could happen here, where you reach the end and then you don't. Then you do a display after an output. And the display comes in and it's like, we're already way, way below the bottom row. So if this operation happens, your cursor should be put to the 0th column as well. If it wasn't already. Okay, we'll just go with that. Now the other thing that is clear here is this new line that needs to be interpreted. And in fact, it needs to be interpreted in an output as well, as a signal. That's right. So CH is a carriage return or a new line. Then it was cursor dot row plus plus. and then cursor dot column. Starts at 0. Oh, I'm gonna let my dog in here quick. He's at the door, scratching his way. One dog decided to come in, the other one wanted to go out. So get out. It's getting a little hot in here for her. So yeah, I got your bed, buddy. Go lay down. You know, well, you want your bone. You see that, bud? Here, here you go. All right. Now this will happen on an output. Is that it'll bring us up a row, but it'll still break out then if you go beyond, which is what I'd expect. That's wrap and truncate. Case where you backspace. There's those the other ones, the only two that I needed to worry about. I realized too that tab kind of needs to be implemented as well. Those are the only two control characters we're going to currently support. So if it's not a control character, then we'll set it here. So interestingly enough, the B has to actually continue here, which should, yeah, after it's done with what it does. I think. Okay. So if you get a backspace in the middle of an output, it reverses the column, or it sets the column less. It subtracts off the column. Now if it gets to negative, then it's got to wrap backwards, or does it just stop at 0? Is what I need to figure out. What did I do before? Yeah, I just set it back to 0. So there's no reverse back, but then it really should though. It should just be a signal to go, keep going back until you can't go back anymore. Then it should be the cursor column is less than 0. Then if the cursor row is greater than 0, then we just set the cursor dot column equal to the number of columns minus 1, and we decrement the row. Where do we actually increment the rows down here? Just realizing I haven't got that done yet. So then if the cursor goes back there, our rows go back by 1. Otherwise, the cursor is just equal to 0. The column is equal to 0. because I don't think tab characters are getting included in this, in which tab characters are kind of interesting in the way that they interact. And you don't really use them much in consoles, do you? So if I just go into CMD and go tab, it gets interpreted as a control. It doesn't really get used. So I don't really need to worry about that here, but in my other one, when you're writing Python code, tabs are kind of nice to deal with if you don't want to use 4 spaces. And I don't know what the standard Python thing is. Do people use 4 spaces or not? So we've set the position. If this is a, you know what, that's why I just did this here, is default. Can you do it default? Like that. And then just say if this is not a control character, then we just write it out. This should be up here, saying that if I've already gone beyond my rows, then, you know what, I can't do anything about it. So I don't interpret the character at all. One thing that doesn't quite do for us is if you then use the display. Output's is a very weird thing. Like command. I want to make sure I read that right again. TI-83 output. Output command is the fastest way. It takes 3 arguments: the row, column, whatever you want to display, and it allows more freedom than display. Off-screen values for the row column will cause an error. It's okay for the part of the text display goes off-screen. When the text goes past the last, it will wrap to the first column of the next row. Text goes past the last column of the last row, the remainder will be truncated. Okay. It will never cause the screen to scroll. When horizontal split screen mode, whoa, I didn't know there was a horizontal split screen mode available for, oh, interesting. Full. Huh. Oh, there's like a split screen mode for interesting. So if this is a dual split screen mode, oh, I'm gonna have to add that at some point. That's kind of neat, actually, really neat. It's gonna make things difficult to do, but it's pretty sweet. In addition, if you're displaying text on the entire home screen, you can place all the text string and then simply display the string, especially useful in movement, because you can shift the screen quite easily. What do you mean with movement? Oh, I see. You keep it in a buffer and then you just, okay. Okay. Okay, so this goes through and it says if the row or column are out of range here, that's okay. It'll blow up. And really, the way that it's described is that if the column is greater than the number of columns to start, sorry, greater than or equal to, or the row is greater than or equal to the number of rows, then all of these will cause an index error with an output buffer error or whatever. Otherwise, it sets cursor position to here. It starts with the text. If the row is greater than the number of rows, which it can't be to start. Anyways, it can't. Then it will go here. If it's R or new line, it will increase the row and set the column back to 0. If it's B, it will reverse the column and then it'll just stop it when it reaches the beginning. Otherwise, it will clear it out. Then what we do is we if we do type the character, then we need to advance the column. But we don't advance the row, because we'll do that here. So if we've reached the end of the column, then we increment it, and we set the column back to 0. If at that point we've reached the end of our rows, then we totally break out, because we're not going to be doing anything. Okay, perfect. And then it'll come back around. It's going to do all this again. All right. So display would be similar. I need to also interpret these other ones. Which, yeah, I know this is... it's like two strategies for dealing with the same thing, which is why I had them in this other class, but I don't think that was the way to handle it. So now, in this case, the display, you could start anywhere. The most you will get here is to the bottom row by doing a new line. You know what I'm going to do is make sure that if we ever go beyond, we just reset the column back to 0. What is mad about that for? Oh. Anyways. So in this one, we do the same thing. It's new line, whatever, we increment the rows. And then we set the column back to 0. If we reach... So now we could come into this where we're off screen again. So I'm thinking about this again. So we are on the very last row. We've already gone out of bounds based on where the cursor position ends with the output command, I think. So you can display whatever combination of text values you want. Text is left side of the screen, while numbers and variables and expressions are displayed on the right. Oh, well, that's I didn't know that part. You can display whatever combination of text and values you want. Text is displayed on the right side of the screen, while numbers, variables, and expressions are displayed on the right. Oh. Text can be moved over right padding with spaces. There's no equivalent for numbers. So display isn't really like a write line. The result is you can never display text on the last line of the screen using the disp command. You need to use the output command. Oh, really? Display command displays a line of text giving each argument its own blank line. Okay, so you can actually concatenate a bunch of stuff. The screen is clear, the arguments will display at the beginning of the first line. If there's text on the first line, the arguments are displayed at the beginning of the first available blank line. Oh, I see. Display text argument line, each argument is on blank line. The screen is clear, the arguments are displayed at the beginning of the first line. But if there's text on the first line, the arguments begin displaying at the first available blank line. So I actually have to go through and find the first available blank line. When all lines have text in them, including the last, the screen will automatically scroll up until every line is blank. Until every line is blank. This means while the display command can technically display an unlimited amount of lines, you should not display more than 7 consecutive lines at any time. There are too many arguments. The arguments that are displayed will be pushed up out of sight to allow other arguments to be displayed. This will not be desired. Get some cool scrolling effects with messaging. Messing with text that you display. The result is you can never display text on the last line using disp. Okay. Also, if you have more than 7 lines, you can use pause to do it. All right, cool. So really, display doesn't just take a string value, it takes an object. And it can be of any type, I suppose, and then it would be evaluated. And now Python's going to do the evaluation, but if it's a Python number, it really shouldn't be. If I want to be true to the way that this works, it shouldn't go off. So I'm going to rewrite this with this new knowledge and start over. Including that very first part. So unlike that, what we do is we look for the very first blank line that we have. So we start at R0. So cursor is only really valuable. Isn't actually valuable so much in the output command or in the display command, because it's always set to the row. So one other thing is if it goes off the left, text is displayed on those numbers, blah blah blah. Does it wrap? That's the question. Text is not wrapped to the next line if it's longer than 60. Oh. Okay, so it actually shows the ellipses is to do this correctly, which I'll have to find where the ellipses are, if I even have the ellipses as a text character array or whatever. So I don't actually need to do any of the cursor truncating, wrapping, or anything like that. In fact, this isn't even useful, other than maybe when I'm getting input. So presumably I should look at how input works with the prompt. I'm guessing it actually always goes to the next line. Input command asks user enter a value for a variable. waiting until the user enters a value, and then press enter. It does not display what variable the user is being asked for, but instead displays a question mark. So that's the default prompt. So it actually probably works in the same way that display works. Only 16 characters of text message will be shown on the screen. So the text message should be kept as short as possible, so that the user's input can fit on the same text. It'll wrap around to the next line. Yeah, okay. So even with input, the cursor is important, but it's not that important. It's like it could be created conditionally on each one. They're all independent in terms of how they do stuff. So I think I might have the concept of a cursor, just not like a global cursor like this. The whole concept of visible, I don't even know if I'll need that at this point. Like that. And then we'll just change this to be... So all that this really is just a container for tracking across this process. And the same could be done here, but we actually started the first blank row. That's interesting. So like if you did a bunch of spaces, does that count as a blank row on output? I'm guessing that I'll have to look and see if it's technically 0, not space. And consider that to be. So this one's going to start at 0, 0. And then it's going to search for the first row. And if it gets to the bottom, it will scroll up automatically. So I would do while, okay, is blank row while this is not a blank row, I go cursor plus plus and cursor dot row is less than rows cursor dot row plus plus. So is blank row is a private function, a private method that will go C is less than calls, C++. Then what I need to do is say if buffer at C, or sorry, row C call dot value not equals 0, which is the empty character, then I'll return false. if this makes it all to the end, then I return true because clearly it's blank row. So it goes till it finds the first one in that row that is blank. So it increases the row, and then it reaches the end, and it will say, so cursor.column is always going to start at 0, but if it reaches the end here, if cursor.row is greater than, is greater than or equal to the number of rows, then I need to wrap everything, which is what I was doing here. And I think I can just name this because it would be scroll. And this sets it to a blank line. Which means the very last row will be blank at this point then. I wonder if I actually need the concept of a new line character. Yeah, anyways. I could just ignore new line characters and treat them like general white space, but they're really handy for a lot of things. So in that case, it scrolls, it makes the last line, clears out the last line. And then it will set the cursor.row equal to row dot the number of rows minus 1, which puts us back to the start. So now we are on the last row. Now we keep doing our but we might be much higher than that. So again, this is the signal to go to the next line. In which case we tell our cursor to go up a row and return to the column beginning. But at that point in time, if we are over, we might need to scroll, which is what we did down here. So if our cursor row is greater than rows, then we scroll. Okay. So if we have the backspace, this is another one where I could probably ignore the backspace, because like why would anybody write the backspace character into it? But I suppose you know what, I am just gonna ignore the backspace in this case. It's like how many times in your coding career have you written a E like that? I've done it occasionally, or like once or twice to do like a little spinny thing in a console, but that's because I didn't really have the concept of the like a cursor, like an output thing, which is what you would use to do this. So I don't think I'll use this at all, but I do need to say default. So really what this is, I should just do is switch this to an if ch is n, or can I do this now? Ch. Yeah, anyways. We increase the row there. Otherwise, it's not a control character. So if it's a printable character, then we would type out. You know what? Why don't we still just allow even anything? Will we just print it out? You know what? Why not? So it'll come out ugly. Who cares? Else we do this and we advance the cursor. Or the column. Then again, if the column is greater than the number of columns that we have available to us, then we need to increment the rows. And reset that. If the rows are greater than that, we scroll. Theoretically, we shouldn't need to reset the column there, but I like the idea of doing it anyways, just to be safe. So this will always end with a scroll, because there's no exit here. We reach the end of our character line. And we are technically on the last line. But the way that the docs read is that if you're on the last line, it should scroll anyways. So like if this cursor.row is equal to rows minus 1, then you'd want to scroll up anyways. And then set so that it leaves you a line for your next time. So we start at the beginning. We keep incrementing the row on the cursor till we find a blank row, or we've exited the range of rows that we have possible to us. We then say if our row count is greater than the number or equal to the number of rows, we scroll it. We set our cursor back, and our column should be 0 still, so that should be fine. So now we're at the final row. We go through our text, and so for a simple string, we'd go through and say, hey, set the character to in 0 to whatever, increment the column. We go to the next, whatever, we keep going. At some point in time, we reach the end of our text. And I think the idea here is not this. It's if it's greater than or equal to the rows, but you always end this with a row plus plus, which would then cause the, if you're on the very last row, it to say, okay, I need to scroll down. So this covers that. Now, the other thing that I didn't realize about display, and which makes display line obsolete, is the fact that it will always give you a new line. So this isn't like a right line, so display line isn't really needed. So I'm just going to dump that. It always assumes that you're displaying a line. And then I've got to get rid of it everywhere else. Oh, crap. So this is display dot resolution width divided by, divided by char sysfont char height. That's that. This goes away. And this goes away. And this gets changed to include the foreground and background like it should have had this entire time. And this goes away. Okay. So, no, I did this wrong. If you reach the end of the line with text, it actually doesn't wrap. Which is kind of interesting, the idea that there would ever be a new line or whatever. Because it just shows the ellipses. That's what it said it does. So really, it's one line of output at a time. This concept here of doing new line characters and that doesn't really make sense. I mean, it shouldn't be interpreted as such for printing or for the use of the display. It's not print. So what happens here actually is that once the column reaches the end, it just breaks out. And this sets it back. And you technically never will go beyond the number of rows. But this would actually set the final column in this row to the ellipses. So in the row, in the calls -1, it would change the value to a to an ellipses, but I don't know that I have an ellipses in the sys font. Come on, where'd you go? Oh, right here. I thought that I did a long time ago include an ellipses in here somewheres. But it would be hard to say which one of these it would be. This looks kind of promising. 3E. So this would be your first line, your second line, and your third line. Or no. What would happen is be all within this line. So you'd expect to see all of these. Did I just hear a blip? I wonder if that caused my screen. No. And only in here would you see something. So if I did this, copy for that. Where are places that we have that? So this is my underscore. So it could be this one right here. Gosh, whatever line this is out of this. So this is what, 250. So if I did, the value should be, is that 30 then? If this should be 256 as the value minus 1. So this list should start at 31. Yeah. So if I subtract off its line number, which is 271, minus 30, which is 241, then take 1 off of that, it should be 240. So we'll go with 240 and just see if that works. $240 it is. Sure. And that needs to be a char 40. Okay, so that this technically should do what the display does, other than the fact that this text can be other things. This should be a value. I need to convert it to a string and then figure out where it technically displays. So basically what I'll do is say, well, if it's a numerical value, then, you know, show it over here. The funny thing is they said if it's a variable, it will even print it over to the side, or an expression. If it's anything but string, it's going to display it over there. I don't think I can achieve that level of I don't think I can't achieve that level of degree of certainty, I guess, with Python or any other language that'll end up. But I think I can tell the difference between at least a string and a number. So I think that would be fine. And then I need to go where this gets implemented in here and say that this would be a object. I wonder if output technically takes things then other than a string value and does the conversion on it. So the question is, how do I figure out whether this is a text or not? Really, so this is like if value is text string, it would be text. Then I would go here and do this. And really, it's not just that. But if it's like a number, then I start on the other end and kind of go backwards. It's like else. We could just do a toString on it and see how it works. Text is equal to value toString, and then do like a just do this where text equals value as string. Then we have to figure out like the length and truncate it so it's no longer than the width of the screen. So it would be like so we would take the no, this is really weird, but so we start at 0 and go the length of the number of columns. Okay, so then we would say that the buffer cursor dot row, but then we'd start going through each character in reverse order. Can I do that? It's probably like string dot reverse. I mean, I can technically rejoin it, but I don't think. Huh, there isn't just like a reverse. Okay, just to be clear, I know how to reverse a string, but I don't know what the simplest way to do it is, which is what I'm looking for. No. I want a built-in. Oh my gosh, really? Okay, well, I guess, well, you know what, actually, it doesn't matter. I could use this, because I'm just going to be enumerating through it anyways. Like this. And then I'm going to be going through and setting this and going, but backwards. So it's like, I set the column equal to calls minus 1 minus the how far away I am from it. So if I'm at the maximum length, which is, let's say if there's 10 columns, 10, I'd be at 10 minus 1. Or maybe I don't need this. So if I have 10 columns, and no, I need to be start at 9, right? And then index, and then, yeah, okay. Then I reverse my position. Now I should technically never get to here because I've limited the number of columns, but then this just resets here, so okay. I wonder if null would come through here, if that would be safer. No. Okay. Yeah. Ugly, but works. Now I think I can just copy the render code. Over. Because that's pretty much the same. It should be anyways. Other than if I'm displaying the cursor in this, but I don't think I am. I'll actually implement the sys font here. Or not implement, instantiate sys font as part of this. And I was doing that because of the idea that I figured I could eventually make it so that I could adjust, allow the person to actually fill in some of the fonts if they want to change it, but okay. Let's see what happens now if I run this, where it falls flat. Ooh. I'm actually getting the menu. Sweet. So now, let's go back to the menu, program menu, and figure out how we highlight the selected row and column. So what I would have to do here is keep track of what our foreground and background is when we're doing this menu. So it's like fg equals get foreground, bg equals get background. Then I need to invert them here on the selected tab. The tab is the selected tab. Then I do set foreground to background, set background to foreground. Then I reset it here. That's not as pretty as it used to be, but should be correct. Ooh. Why is my background not getting through? Set the foreground to the background. Set the background to the foreground. Oh, you know what's kind of interesting? It's because these happen in the other... These don't happen real time. I actually need to, like... Yeah. Yeah, but they should happen. So I clear. I start my tabs. Now, so if I do this, if I clear this out, there's got to be something else going on here. What is blowing up when I first do this? See, program at. Then it comes in here. I don't know what that's doing. Obviously, it's getting some interference. I don't know if I'm displaying anything when I run here. I do. Why do I display program? Oh, that's right, because I used to have a... I used to actually have a title menu, and then the menu would start below that, but it never really, it doesn't really. Okay. So let's go and take a really quick look at how I'm, make sure I'm not passing the wrong thing for get foreground or get background. So this gets my background, this gets my foreground. And those return foreground and background. This sets foreground, this sets background. Aha. That was my problem. Now when I'm on the menu and I do this stupid operation, imperative operation. There we go. Perfect. And this is all working the way I'd expect it to, which is nice. Okay, so let's get the menu drawn then. Now, one thing that's nice about the TI-83 is that when your menu gets filled up, is that it kind of goes off the screen, I believe. There's more options. So there's one line for the title, there's 7 or 9 on a color calculator slots for menu items, and no scrolling. You can add a next to the bottom, but that looks bad, especially your back right there. The screen refreshes and blinks. When you press down at the bottom, no, during the loading of the menu, you can see, okay, so this is limitations that are actually on it here, but surprisingly, I don't think there is, you can't have a maximum of 7 options on the So I think how I did this on the FC85 is I made it so that if you go over a certain number, it'll, you know, it allows you to scroll. So I don't think I should limit the number of options that you have to you. I mean, if you want to put 1,000,000 here, this will be a deviation for sure that I take from them, or from it. I'm just wondering if I limit it to like 100 or something like that, so that it's not too nutty. Or if you get to 1 through 10, and there's a total of 10 options that can be displayed. And if you reach the 10th, the last option, the 0th option, is like a next. So it automatically will page for you. Or if there's a, I think I can make it scroll. Yeah, I think scrolling would be better. And it would show an arrow when there's more options up or down. I think that's how I had it. Okay, well, let's try this anyways. So I will need to get the dimensions of the home screen too. So one of the things I have here with the well, I'll think about that in a little bit here. Sorry, I'm just thinking through this. Because it has to be maintained. You know what, I'm going to come through a second pass and fix these scrolling issues. For right now, I just need to get back where I was. So this was setting my position relative to rows and columns. I think I just set it, or set, yeah, my row is there. This is not cursor.write, it's output. I want it output, but I do want it truncated, so but I think I can do that later by saying oh, that's right. I have to highlight the row if it's selected. That's why I had this printed first. And just set it back. Then I increment the column. And then I set it to the value, which is the opt. That. Then I increment the row. Now, one thing I was doing is when I would do this, I would switch to it based on it. But what I'm going to do is say, well, if the target menu actually has a selected index in range, I'm not going to set it back to 0. So that's what I did, was doing here. It's just to be easy. So it's really like if selected option index is less than tabs at selected tab index. Dot length or options length. Or sorry, if it's greater than or equal to the length of that. Because it will never be less, because you can't go less than 0. Then I'll set it back to 0. Otherwise, it's the selected option index. It just stays where it is. So it's a clamp operation, right? Same with this. So that way, if I'm down here and I want to go to edit that one, I'm not resetting it. But if I come over here and then come back, I mean, I could, in theory, actually just keep state for each tab so that if I'm here on help and then I go to new and I go back, it's still on help, but I'm not sure. I'm just happy this is all looking good. And it works, sort of. I don't think that's quite right. And I can't escape anymore. So it's sort of working. Oh. I knew that was failing before. And that's because I wrote all of these programs with the new line characters in them. But the display doesn't work that way anymore. So in theory, I can go through and just wipe out all those. And I don't have input working quite right yet. This lines wasn't quite working either. Okay, let me try running these again once. So if I'm here and I press colors or execute colors, I need to have that reset, but so Derp Defender has hello world, followed by some cryptic sign. Why does it have that there? Oh, because the new line. So if I take that off. So I should really make that actually kind of like the new line character actually have some sort of like symbol that's not ugly like that. So now it's fixed. Hello world, find help. It's testing. Lines. Why does lines not work? So it's only printing that last line. So it sets background to 7, it says foreground to 1, clears the draw out, which makes it white. White with blue cover. Then it draws a line. It sets the foreground to 2, draws another line, sets the foreground, draws a horizontal line, sets the foreground, draws a vertical line, then it pauses. But what appears to happen is it just draws that last line. Or, sorry, the horizontal line at 10. So it does this one. We don't get to see so if I just comment these ones out, does it still do that? No, it doesn't draw them at all. It does set the colors correctly. Okay, so let's find out why. And let's fix this so colors are pushed and popped maybe when you run a program so that they don't seep back in to each other. But anyways, graphics has a problem with oh, I see. So these are called like this, which is using the foreground. But this is, oh, you know what? I'm calling this one twice. That's a problem. So that should take care of one of the problems. And this is the other problem. There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right. So let's have the concepts of color for program stack, maybe. So we have a active program, which is on the program stack. What if the foreground and background weren't on the display, but were on the program themselves? Like each program has the capability. Then it would just pop and push and pop with the thing itself. So if you did a set, I'm liking that idea. So if we said this isn't on this display buffer, but is actually on the program itself. And we're up in here, we've got a foreground and background defaults. So this would be active program dot set bg. And really we just do like, we don't actually need to be a function, we can just make that setter. I'm just going to assume that nullability there isn't going to be a problem. I mean, I could have the concept of like a global so get foreground, set, get, set. So now if I call colors, it's like that. And I come back out and we're just fine. Interesting, like that fixed another issue apparently. Because these color lines weren't showing up. Or maybe I never ran it after I ran lines. But yeah. Okay. So that's all working now. Now what we should do, like I said, is test to see what happens when we go above. Oh. That worked. Whoa. I'm actually surprised that worked. I suppose it's using all of the... Huh. But yeah, notice how I'm doing this? There's no flashing. And that's because there's that concurrency issue is gone. Everything happens in the update cycle. This is pretty nice at this. Okay. Ooh, it's almost getting close to bedtime. So I'm back almost where I started, other than I need to get input working. Because when I do create new, it just poops out at me. And that's because input isn't... The input program just sits and does this. So the input program is going to kind of work like... sorry, like the... I mean, it kind of works on the home screen. But it has to kind of run in its own thread. So just for a second. So what it does is technically it runs the prompt, if there is one. Otherwise, if that's empty or not provided, or null, or none, which I assume would all come out the same. And let's just say you're not allowed an empty prompt. You either provide it or you don't. It's really if it's just null. If prompt is null. So it's really just this or this is how it's structured. But then it doesn't new line. See, it just goes. So input set that, started retrieving input, and then it did stuff, including blink a cursor. But I think it displayed a title, like, oh no, create program did. That's why input can't actually clear home. I gotta get rid of that new line character out of that on the create, which is in the root. Create programs here. So what I need now is a blinking cursor. Which would actually be like technically on the next line of it. So input does have to interact with and it can't undo scrolling, so if you went many lines, it'd be kind of hosed. This is going to be kind of interesting how this will be implemented. It's got to work like display. Sort of, in that it finds that new line. But then I've got to continually like pump text into it. I suppose I can just redraw over its previous lines. No. Well, so it's not going to use display like normal. Maybe input shouldn't really be its own program like this, but should be part of the. Well, no. I should be able to make this work. But I need context about where the cursor is, or where I'm starting at from an input perspective. Or I need a lot more information about the home rows in order to make it work. Well, maybe this isn't what it needs to be doing. Maybe input is just kind of a special kind of pause. And really all pause does is sleep until you get the enter key. It's kind of what input does. But the key difference is that one second. So really this is like a begin input is what it would kind of trigger in the home screen. And then finishing it would just return whatever that input is. But the key difference is that it would blink the cursor. I think I'm going to hang it up for tonight and sleep on this one. I did that. Oh, I still need to display the prompt, right? In fact, how I'll probably end up doing this is that here on the computer, input's not going to be like a it's not going to get the prompt like this. In fact, I might end up deleting this entirely at some point. And I could probably just use a special like update on this or something like that. I don't know. In fact, let's just get rid of it and use pause for now. Because it's essentially the same operation. But I would tell the home to like begin input and pass it the prompt, which then would start the input thing. Which would process until they press enter. And then there'd be like a home. So pause is going to return, which will then bring it back to not this thread. Yeah, I need to rethink this. Or I need to think about how this is going to be done. I'm going to hang it up for tonight. Hopefully do some of this again tomorrow. Okay. For now, it's just going to be pause. But good progress. Oh, push. There we go. All right. Well, I'm going to call it good. Have a good night.